three of America's closest allies just delivered a devastating blow to Donald Trump's Middle East strategy, and his response reveals exactly how isolated and desperate his administration has become.
Accompanying aircraft circle over Windsor Castle. Lots of cameras of people on the streets going to the sky, trying to get a picture of that really impressive scene. And we now have the President of the United States touching down on the estate of Windsor Castle, just waiting and looking at these pictures, waiting for him to step out. We know that he was very excited about this second state visit, the invitation from King Charles. Just the other day, in fact, he described King Charles as an elegant man, that Windsor Castle was one of the most beautiful castles. He was excited to be here and saying it would be a very exciting day. And right there we have the moment where we have the Prince and Princess of Wales greeting U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump. They are doing that initial hello, and then they will walk over, greet King Charles. It will be a bit of a long walk, though. There'll be a bit of a slow walk over and have a chat. It's really interesting because at this point, we all want to know, what are they talking about? We know that often the royals keep it very light. The conversation doesn't get too heavy or political. We don't anticipate knowing or being told what those chats were about. That's a relatively guarded secret. When we talk about royal protocol, the officials are not supposed to share those details. But of course, we will be paying attention to royal protocol. Will there be any gaffes?
Well, we'll certainly talk about that when we get to his inspecting the troops, because there was one notable in 2019. But right now, we've just had the moment of greeting King Charles and Queen Camilla, the handshake as they welcome President Trump, someone who has described the king as a beautiful man, a wonderful man, a close friend, that greeting, and now the other dignitaries who have assembled and who are going to be part of these 2 days of state proceedings. But there is the king, and again, it is a...
The United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia have simultaneously announced their formal recognition of a Palestinian state, marking a watershed moment that has left Trump scrambling to maintain any semblance of control over his crumbling foreign policy agenda. This isn't just symbolic politics. This represents a coordinated international rebellion against Trump's unwavering support for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and it's happening at the worst possible time for the embattled American president. The synchronized nature of these announcements sends an unmistakable message. America's traditional allies have lost confidence in Trump's leadership on one of the world's most critical issues. To understand why this moment is so catastrophic for Trump, we need to examine how his administration's hardline stance has systematically alienated America's most trusted partners on the world stage. For decades, the United States has maintained a delicate balance in Middle East diplomacy, working alongside key allies to broker peace between Israelis and Palestinians. That careful diplomatic framework has now completely collapsed under Trump's watch, replaced by a unilateral approach that prioritizes personal relationships over strategic partnerships. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced the UK's recognition in a carefully crafted video statement, emphasizing that the move was intended to revive hope of peace for both Palestinians and Israelis. Starmer made it crystal clear that this wasn't a reward for Hamas, the militant group that controls Gaza. Instead, he emphasized that Hamas would have no future role in Palestinian governance or security under any two-state solution. This nuanced position directly challenges Trump's simplistic narrative that any recognition of Palestinian statehood amounts to supporting terrorism. The coordinated nature of these announcements reveals something far more damaging for Trump than a simple policy disagreement. His closest allies no longer trust his judgment on critical international issues and are willing to risk American displeasure to pursue what they see as necessary diplomatic initiatives. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney wrote on social media that Canada recognizes the state of Palestine and offers partnership in building a peaceful future for both Palestine and Israel. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese described the announcement as part of a coordinated international effort to build momentum for a two-state solution, calling it the only path to enduring peace and security for both peoples. What makes this diplomatic uprising even more humiliating for Trump is that he saw it coming and completely failed to stop it.
Is expected to recognize a Palestinian state in the coming days as the killing in Gaza continues. It often seems that you're the only person that Israel will listen to. What more can you say to them to tell them to stop? And why is the UK's position on a Palestinian state, in your view, wrong?
We have to remember October 7th, one of the worst, most violent days in the history of the world, not just there, the history of the world. And I got to see the tapes, and I wish I didn't see them, actually, but I got to see them. And I want an end. I want the hostages released, and I think it's going to be okay. But it has been a brutal period of time. But this has been going on for a long time. This is not something that's over the last year, 2 years. But this has been for decades and decades. But we want it to end. We have to have the hostages back immediately. That's what the people of Israel want. They want them back, and we want the fighting to stop, and it's going to stop. But a lot of bad things. You know, Hamas said that they're going to put the hostages up as bait. They're going to put the hostages in front of any attack. And that's pretty brutal. We haven't heard that one in a long time.
During a state visit to Britain last week, Trump met with Starmer and explicitly disagreed with the UK's plans to recognize Palestinian statehood. When questioned by reporters, Trump acknowledged having a disagreement with the Prime Minister on that particular issue, but his diplomatic pressure proved utterly ineffective in changing Britain's course. The failure becomes even more embarrassing when we consider Trump's heavy-handed attempts to use economic leverage. Back in July, when Canada first announced its intention to recognize Palestine, Trump immediately threatened trade retaliation. He posted on Truth Social that Canada's backing of Palestinian statehood would make it very hard for the United States to make a trade deal with them. The threat was transparent and crude: fall in line with our Middle East policy or face economic consequences. But Trump's intimidation tactics spectacularly backfired. Not only did Canada proceed with recognition, but it coordinated with the UK and Australia to deliver an even more powerful message.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, it's a remarkable question. Of course, we are going to cooperate directly as we always have. USMCA is strength together. It's strength of the three countries together. That's what makes North America that contributes to North America be the economic envy of the world. And Canada is absolutely committed to work with both our partners. If there's opportunities to improve the agreement, we will pursue those. We can think of some. Our Mexican colleagues can. I'm sure the Americans will as well. That'll be informed by our review process. But we'll move forward together, without question. Is that unequivocal enough for you? Because if you want it to be unequivocal, just write down unequivocal.
The three countries essentially called Trump's bluff, demonstrating that his transactional approach to diplomacy has clear limits when it comes to matters of principle and international law. The timing couldn't be worse for Trump's international standing. This coordinated recognition comes just days before the UN General Assembly, where more countries, including France, are expected to follow suit. French President Emmanuel Macron has already confirmed that France will announce Palestinian state recognition during the assembly, with Belgium, Luxembourg, and other European nations preparing similar moves. Trump now faces the humiliating prospect of addressing the UN General Assembly while being at odds with more than half of the member nations on one of the world's most pressing conflicts. This represents a complete collapse of American diplomatic leadership under his administration. The international community is moving forward on Middle East peace efforts without American guidance or consent, effectively sidelining the United States from a process it once dominated. What's particularly damaging is how these allies frame their decision. They're not rejecting American leadership in principle. They're specifically rejecting Trump's approach of unconditional support for Netanyahu's government. The three countries explicitly condemned Hamas and emphasized that the militant group would have no role in future Palestinian governance. This sophisticated diplomatic positioning undermines Trump's argument that recognizing Palestinian statehood rewards terrorism. Instead, these allies are arguing that recognition actually marginalizes Hamas by empowering moderate Palestinian leadership committed to peaceful coexistence with Israel. Trump's response has been predictably angry, yet remarkably ineffective. He's already signaled that he'll announce some form of retaliation after Netanyahu visits Washington next week. But what can he realistically do? Imposing trade sanctions on the UK, Canada, and Australia would be economic suicide for the United States. These aren't adversaries or competitors. They're America's most important trading partners and military allies, relationships that have been cultivated over decades and cannot be easily replaced. The situation deteriorates further when you consider the broader context. More than 140 countries have already recognized Palestinian statehood, meaning Trump's position is increasingly isolated globally. The coordinated action by three major allies has essentially given diplomatic cover for other hesitant nations to follow suit, creating unstoppable momentum toward universal recognition. Trump's Middle East strategy is now in complete disarray. His administration bet everything on supporting Netanyahu's hardline approach, believing that other countries would eventually fall in line behind American leadership. Instead, the opposite has happened. International pressure on Israel is mounting, American allies are charting independent courses on critical international issues, and Trump looks increasingly out of touch with global opinion.
We are both undertaking massive transformations of our economy. Plan Mexico, Canada strong. Our efforts will be strengthened by working together.
Mexico and Canada want to do more on two fronts. First, work together to save North America-wide free trade by coordinating strategies for next year's review of CUSMA, the trade deal that replaced the original NAFTA 5 years ago.
How do we eliminate these tariffs that we both face prior to the end of the year so that we can have a fruitful discussion on the USMCA future beginning in 2026?
The economic implications are also significant and potentially devastating. Trump has repeatedly threatened trade wars with allies over political disagreements, but these threats ring hollow when applied to countries that are essential to American economic prosperity. Canada remains America's largest trading partner, while the UK and Australia represent crucial markets for American businesses across multiple sectors. Threatening economic retaliation against these allies over their Palestine policy would be seen as petty and counterproductive by the business community Trump claims to champion. Perhaps most damaging is how this episode reveals the fundamental weakness of Trump's transactional approach to diplomacy. He treats international relationships like business deals, where everything can be negotiated based on immediate self-interest and leverage. But his allies have demonstrated that some issues transcend narrow economic calculations. The recognition of Palestinian statehood represents a moral and strategic judgment that these countries weren't willing to compromise on, regardless of Trump's threats or inducements. This diplomatic rebellion also exposes the broader failure of Trump's foreign policy team. How did his administration fail to anticipate and prevent such a coordinated action by America's closest allies? The fact that three major partners could organize simultaneous announcements without effective American interference suggests either complete intelligence failure or total irrelevance in allied decision-making processes. Either scenario represents a catastrophic breakdown in American diplomatic capabilities. The Netanyahu factor adds another layer of complexity to this crisis. Trump has tied his Middle East credibility entirely to supporting the Israeli Prime Minister. But Netanyahu's own political position is increasingly precarious. Israeli public opinion is deeply divided on Palestinian statehood, and Netanyahu's hardline stance doesn't represent a consensus even within Israel. By aligning so closely with Netanyahu personally rather than with broader Israeli interests, Trump has painted himself into a corner where he can't adapt to changing circumstances. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has also fundamentally undermined Trump's position. With over 60,000 Palestinians killed according to local authorities, international opinion has shifted dramatically against Israeli military tactics. Trump's unwavering support for Israel's campaign has left him defending actions that even traditional Israeli allies find difficult to justify. The coordinated recognition by the UK, Canada, and Australia represents their judgment that the humanitarian crisis requires immediate action to preserve any hope for a peaceful resolution. Looking ahead, Trump faces an impossible choice. He can either continue his current approach and watch American influence in the Middle East evaporate entirely, or he can attempt a dramatic policy shift that would anger his domestic political base and humiliate him internationally. Neither option offers a viable path to diplomatic success or the restoration of American leadership. The broader implications extend far beyond the Middle East. If America's closest allies are willing to publicly break with Trump on such a significant issue, what does that say about American leadership on other global challenges? Climate change, trade policy, military cooperation, all of these areas require allied coordination that Trump has now made exponentially more difficult through his heavy-handed approach. The economic dimension of this crisis will likely worsen in the coming weeks. Trump's threats of trade retaliation have already created uncertainty in markets, and businesses are questioning the stability of trading relationships with countries that might face sudden policy changes based on political disagreements. This unpredictability undermines one of Trump's supposed strengths, his business background and understanding of economic relationships. What makes this situation particularly dangerous for Trump is that it's largely self-inflicted. A more sophisticated diplomatic approach might have found ways to accommodate allied concerns while maintaining American influence over the peace process. Instead, Trump's all-or-nothing stance has pushed allies toward independent action that undermines American interests. The recognition announcements also highlight Trump's declining influence over global public opinion. His administration's communication strategy has failed to make a compelling case for why Palestinian statehood recognition would be counterproductive. Instead, international audiences have largely accepted the Allied argument that recognition actually advances peace by empowering moderate Palestinian leadership and marginalizing extremist elements. As we approach the UN General Assembly, Trump faces the humiliating prospect of being increasingly isolated on an issue where American leadership was once taken for granted. The coordinated action by the UK, Canada, and Australia has created momentum that will be difficult to reverse, regardless of what threats or incentives Trump might offer in his desperation. This diplomatic disaster represents a fundamental failure of Trump's entire foreign policy approach. By prioritizing personal relationships with strongmen like Netanyahu over broader strategic considerations and allied partnerships, Trump has alienated the democratic allies that America needs for effective global leadership. The recognition of Palestinian statehood by three major allies isn't just a policy disagreement. It's a vote of no confidence in Trump's judgment and leadership on the world stage. The question now is whether Trump can salvage anything from this debacle, or whether his Middle East policy will continue spiraling toward complete irrelevance. Given his track record and temperament, the smart money is on continued escalation and further diplomatic isolation. America's allies have sent a clear message. They're prepared to move forward on critical global issues with or without American leadership. For a president who campaigned on making America respected again, that's the ultimate foreign policy failure.